everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and today here on the channel, we're going to be talking about 1973's Mean Streets and its brand new Criterion 4K Blu-ray that just came out. So Mean Streets, released 50 years ago. It's not the first film directed by Martin Scorsese, but it is the film that put him on the map. It's the first one that's really telling one of his stories. He worked for Roger Corman before him, and Roger Corman likes to put out low-budget films. And, you know, he gave him a little bit of money. He put his name out there, and then finally in 1973, he got his big break. He's working with Harvey Keitel, and for the first time, Robert De Niro, who still has a working relationship with him. They just put out Killers of the Flower Moon together just last month, so these guys have had a 50-year working relationship, and it's really cool to watch Mean Streets. You actually can see the beginning of their relationship as Martin Scorsese gets older, as Robert De Niro gets older. These stories start to change. You know, this movie's talking about really like low-level mafiosos. Fellas 17 years later, you could argue that they're like mid-pack guys, and then once we eventually get to the Irishman, these are the higher-ups, just showing it as Martin Scorsese ages, as Robert De Niro ages. These films age with them. You know, they kind of rise up in the ranks. Like, these guys, they're young guys. Martin Scorsese is trying to tell the story about himself growing up in Little Italy and all the stuff that he saw. He said he saw people like this all the time. And before I get too far, I mean, Harvey Keitel stars in this movie as Charlie. He's got an uncle who you could tell is pretty high up in the mob ranks there. You know, he has a lot of expectations. But Charlie has a friend, Johnny Boy, played by Robert De Niro. He's also got a cousin, Teresa, who Harvey Keitel, he's pretty sweet on her, honestly. You know, they start dating. It's got to be in secrecy because his uncle's going to get pissed off about it because mainly he doesn't trust Johnny Boy. Johnny Boy is a hothead. You know, he's free and loose. He's depressed. He's sad, which I really like that they dive into that. They don't really ever talk about, you know, mental illness 50 years ago. That was a real touchy subject, and I really like that they were diving into the fact that Johnny Boy doesn't have a great life, and that's why he's such a loose cannon, firing from the hip. He doesn't care what people think of him. He's going to do what he wants, and it all builds up to such a great conclusion at the end of this movie, and it's really damn shocking as well. I really think that the third act of this movie is fantastic, and you get really early views of all the stuff that Martin Scorsese would become known for. The needle drops, the inclusion of rock music. It's actually what got him the job doing The Last Waltz, is how he included rock music in this movie. And it's all done so well. The slow pan-ins on a character, getting in on a close-up. The way he does beautiful set design, creating these really lived-in worlds. And, you know, he filmed it in Little Italy, I think in 28 days. There's somebody in this movie who he grew up knowing, the person yelling down at Charlie and Johnny Boy. That's somebody who Martin Scorsese really knew. He puts his mother in this movie as well, which he would always do until, you know, unfortunately her passing. But seeing her again in this movie, you always recognize Martin Scorsese's mom and dad whenever they pop up in movies, and it's really cool to see her in this movie as well. Robert De Niro, though, at a very young age, really just showed that he has got it. And Robert De Niro, he's played so many different characters here. He's a hothead, he's a loose cannon.
That's what I think of you, a jerk-off. You're smiling like you're a jerk-off.
But he's great. You know, you really do like his character. He's a bit of a dick, and you can't understand why he's making the decisions he's making. You know, he just comes from such a dark place, and you're like, why are you doing this? You're just trying to self-destruct. You're making every single, you know, he owes a guy money. He has money, but he's just refusing to pay it. Every time he gets a little bit in his pocket, it just burns a hole in it. He wants to go take out girls, go out drinking, you know, do whatever other people around his age are doing because he doesn't care. His life hasn't gone as well as he had hoped it would. He's just out there making all the worst decisions, but Charlie loves him. And Charlie has a good heart. He seems like Charlie has a good heart. He's very religious. You know, he goes to church and he's asking God for help, and he's trying to make sure that everybody's happy, whether it be his uncle, Teresa, and Robert De Niro's Johnny Boy. He's trying to make sure everybody else is happy at the sacrifice of his own happiness. You know, he's trying to get it across to his buddy, like, I love you, man, but you're gonna fuck this up for all of us. And really, that all comes to a head at the very end of this movie, and this movie is so well shot. Again, it's supposed to look very low budget, down and dirty, gritty. You know, all this stuff, all those settings have very low light. When they're in the bar, it's just lit by red lights. When they're in the exterior scenes, it's almost like one light, and then it's just very dark and gritty. Got that 1970s New York look feel to it. There's a scene on the bridge which looks right out of The Godfather, which came out around the exact same time. But The Godfather, it's a lot more cleaned up, buttoned up as far as the cinematography goes. This feels like it was shot like an indie film. It's edited like a modern day indie film. You could just see that this is Martin Scorsese getting his footing underneath him, but he still had it. You know, even though this is really early in his career, he had it. He just needed to, you know, molded into what it would eventually become. And by 1990s Goodfellas, I think he perfected his filmmaking. And then now Killers of the Flower Moon, the guy is just, he's a god amongst men. He is one of the greatest filmmakers ever, and you could just see it on the screen 50 years ago with Mean Streets. Anyway, guys, we also are here today to talk about the Criterion 4K Blu-ray that just came out, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. But before we do that, if you are a fan of 4K Blu-ray reviews, movie reviews, lists, podcasts, and sometimes shorts, we try to do them all here on the channel. Nothing helps the channel out more than by just liking this video, subscribing to the channel. Maybe think about joining our channel memberships if you want to support us financially, but it's absolutely no pressure at all. You can just look at that in the description below. But anyway, let's talk about this Criterion 4K. Well, here it is, Mean Streets on 4K Blu-ray, courtesy of the Criterion Collection, and from what I understand, Studio Canal and Criterion actually split the cost of this. I think there's a second sight 4K of this coming out, I believe next year at some point. For people who aren't in the United States, we got this Criterion release, but I'm not 100% sure if Studio Canal actually did split the cost with them. Their logo isn't on the box, it's not on the disc. When you put the movie in, the only thing that pops up is the Warner Brothers logo, so I'm not 100% sure if they split the cost, but from what I understand, they actually did. And also from what I've been reading from people who had early copies of this, they were pretty disappointed with the visuals on this one. But before we get into that, let's look at the packaging. We didn't get a digibook here, which did surprise me. I thought we were going to get the fine china from Criterion. That didn't happen. You go inside, it's a 2-disc set. You get a Blu-ray and a 4K Blu-ray. On the Blu-ray, you'll get the downgraded version of the 4K. That's also where all of your extras are going to be, is on that Blu-ray. All the extras are pretty much previously released extras. There's a 2011 DGA conference that has Richard Linklater and Martin Scorsese talking about this film. There's a good video essay on here. There's actually, my favorite extra on here is an 8-minute featurette from 1973 when Martin Scorsese and his buddies talking about growing up in Little Italy and his inspiration for this film. You know, it was made 50 years ago, and it's just fun to see a young Martin Scorsese, see his mom cooking dinner for him, and just seeing how she hasn't really changed through the years as well, and how their relationship is, you know, still strong, and they would be together for all those years to come, popping up in Goodfellas. It was really cool to see that aspect. I would have liked a making of documentary when it comes to the extras. I was a little bit disappointed. I felt like there wasn't enough for a film like this that has so much history, and not just Martin Scorsese, but in film history in general. This is in the National Library of Congress, so the extras, they were a little bit disappointing. As far as the audio track, it's an LPCM mono track. You have no other audio track on here. I would have liked for a new mix, but I understand, you know, we're here to preserve history. This is the Criterion Collection we're talking about. They don't really spring for an Atmos track or a DTS HD 5.1 track for an older film. They really just go with the mono track, and as long as everything is coming in crisp and clear, you don't have to worry about it. Anytime the music kicks in, it's not overwhelming where you have to lower it, so I thought they did a good job on that. Obviously, I would like a new mix, but it's understandable why they did this and why they went this route. As long as it's crisp and clear and we're preserving history, then they went the right route, in my opinion. Now, when it comes to the visuals, now this is where things get a little bit controversial. I read some early reviews from people, and I don't really like to dive into that too much, but somebody actually reached out to me a couple weeks ago on the channel and told me that they had heard that this scan was disappointing, that they had changed the whole entire color temperature of it, and they absolutely did. It's much more yellow and green and warmer than it used to be, whereas I remember this film being much more cooler. The whites were white, where now they're like almost like an off-white. When you see Harvey Keitel in the church, the first time I saw that, I'm like, that's not how I remember this looking. But I wasn't that offended by it. But I have been offended by changes made by the Criterion Collection when it comes to color temperatures in the past. The Three Colors trilogy from the Criterion Collection came out last year. This is one of my favorite trilogies of all time. I couldn't wait to get it on 4K Blu-ray, mainly because I just love these three films. And I put them in, and they looked great. The resolution increased, low amount of film grain, vivid, dynamic, but they changed the color temperature. These weren't the films that I remember, to the point that I won't be watching those 4Ks the next time I watch this trilogy. I will probably just watch the Blu-rays, except for Three Colors Red. They kind of got the consistencies right on that one, but at least white and blue, I'll be watching the Blu-rays because those are the films that I can remember. So I can understand why people would be very upset with them changing the color temperature. This isn't the movie that I remember. I can see people being upset about that, and I completely understand. I didn't really run into that as much, mainly because I felt like they did a good enough job of turning up that resolution. This movie was shot in very low light, so it's not a 4K that's going to knock your socks off by design. You know, what they had to work with, filming on location, low light, it's gonna look dark. It always looked dark, this movie. It always felt down and dirty and gritty, and for them to turn all that up, it would have been a little bit weird. I just wish they didn't touch that color temperature, but then again, Martin Scorsese approved this apparently. That's what it says right on the box, is that he approved this transfer, so I'm assuming this is how he wanted the film to look, and he just didn't have the technology 50 years ago, so he probably feels like, hey, I'm able to put the movie out. We talk about this with George Lucas and James Cameron all the time, and we knock them for it, but it is their movies. They're allowed to do whatever they want. They made the film. If they want it to look like shit, it can look like shit. American Graffiti, from what I understand, doesn't look good. I've heard nothing but bad things about it, but George Lucas loves to smooth out his movies and play around with them and change how you remember him, and that's perfect, and that's his right. Do I support his decision? No, but it's his right. It's his movie. He can do whatever the hell he wants with it. Martin Scorsese, this is a movie that's kind of looking back on his life, him growing up in Little Italy and people that he knew. So for him to, say, hey, this is how I wanted the movie to look. They did still turn up the resolution. It still looks great as far as I'm concerned. They hit the deep blacks, the low light, the red lights in the bar. That stuff all looks phenomenal now on 4K Blu-ray. Now, there are some points in this movie where you're like, oh my God, that looks awful. So it's very much a mixed bag. I can't say that it's a 5 out of 5 or 10 out of 10 visuals, but it's also not an atrocious, disgusting thing that people have been talking about. I would say that this is the definition of a mixed bag when it comes to the 4K and the visuals. Overall, I would say this entire package is a mixed bag. Kind of a missed opportunity, in my opinion, for a film that is this culturally significant. It's a big deal. People love Mean Streets. I was really looking forward to this. I thought this was going to be one of Criterion's big releases of the year. That's why I was expecting a digibook. And overall, we just didn't really get as much as I was hoping for. I would have liked a different audio track. The one that's on here is fine. I would have liked more extras, but the extras that are on here are fine. The visuals, I would have liked a better visual presentation, but I understand why it can't look as good as I hoped it would look. So it's just fine. I would describe this entire 4K Blu-ray as fine. It's one you should probably grab in a 50% off sale. Do not pay full price for it. Right now, the Barnes & Noble sale is still going on. If you're a fan of Mean Streets, this is the time to buy it. It's never going to get lower than it is right now. It's in the Criterion collection. Maybe if you're one of those people who wants to wait for the second sight 4K Blu-ray, maybe they'll have more extras on it. I imagine it'll probably still be the same scan. I can't confirm that though, but I can't imagine them going in and touching up this scan any more than they already have. It's still a pretty decent scan, so how would I rate this 4K on a scale of 1 to 10? I would still give this 4K Blu-ray a 7.5 out of 10. I could definitely recommend it, just not at full price. And we're also going to be giving away another copy of this on 4K Blu-ray to our channel members, so if you guys would like to join the ranks with them, all you got to do is click the join button or click the link in the description below. You'll be supporting the channel financially. Each tier has their own perks, but if you're a member of any of those tiers, you're going to be entered into our giveaway where we will be giving away a copy of Mean Streets, signed, sealed, and delivered right from me to your house through the mail, of course. So if you guys want to do that, we would really appreciate it. It really does help support the channel. And I want to thank everybody else for supporting Let's Talk. If you want to continue to support us, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, get out in those mean streets, and tell your friends about us. We will be seeing you around.